Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Irv Homer Show. It's Monday, November the 17th, 2008. And if you're just joining us, welcome. If you are one of our regular listeners, we welcome you to the program. We're broadcasting from irvhomer.com. And you can check my website at www.irvhomer.com or email me, as many folks do, at evilerv@irvhomer.com. And this program is brought to you courtesy technologically of RGH Computer Services for all your computer problems. But the most important thing that they're dealing with today with RGH Computer Services is security, how to make your computer secure so you don't end up losing or having invasion for identity theft. We do this program 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and try to bring to you information that you don't get. Not that it's not available, but when you have news directors that screen what the news is, you hear the news that they want you to hear, not what you want to hear. So it's a matter of not saying that, well, you're getting something different than other people get. The fact of the matter is that the news is out there. It's just that I find certain news stories more interesting and more informative than the regular news directors do. And so I think this program is a little unique. We also have phones for you to call in at 215-253-8877, 215-253-8877, and we'll be bringing you up to date on a new event in the Irv Homer broadcast career. But as yet, it's just in its infancy, so we can't tell you anything yet, but we will. So once again, we have a chat room available for you, and some folks are already on the chat room. We have a telephone number for you to call at 215-253-8877. And of course, I have a lot of things to talk about, things that actually have been in the news that I think worth mentioning. And I will as soon as we go to our chat room and respond to Alan from Maple Shade. And Alan says, Irv, can you clarify something you said last Friday? You mentioned the major oil companies are dropping prices until they put the alternative energy companies out of business. They can't just drop prices off gasoline at will. Prices for unleaded gas are set by the big money traders on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Yes, the refiners and oil companies can flood the market with crude and gas, and if demand remains stable or drops and suppliers increase, prices will fall. All of those things, Alan, do play an important part in determining what the price at the pump is going to be. However, when the speculators buy in bulk and the profit margin is so high that they have plenty of wiggle room to determine how much it's going to cost at the pump. So all of these things do take place and play an integral part in what the average gallon of gasoline is going to cost by the time it gets to us, the consumer. Is it a conspiracy? I don't know. It's a conspiracy because it is evident. The fact is that all of these companies, whether it be the New York Mercantile Exchange, whether it be the oil companies, are concerned about one thing, and that is to destroy any competition that will arise. So they do get together and recognize that if America or any country gets on an alternative energy kick to reduce their profit, whether it's the speculators, whether it's the bulk buyers, whether it is the refineries, they're all going to be hurt by alternative energy sources. Now those companies, oil companies, speculators that are already involved in alternative energy sources, they're not worried because they're going to be the energy developers and we're going to buy from them anyway. So it's just a matter of transferring their assets from one source of energy supply to another. But there is a conspiracy among them all to drive the alternative energy companies out of business that are not affiliated with the, quote, group of investors in alternative energy. And we become the victims. So you're right and you're wrong. And I'm right and I didn't include the whole picture as to what dictates that market at that pump, because it makes no sense to me at all. If a dealer buys 30,000 gallons of gasoline and puts it in his tanks, and he's selling it, and he buys it at a certain price, and he sells it for $3.95 a gallon, the next day the price is down to $3.60, $2.70, now it's down to $2.09. Well, that isn't what he paid for it when it was in the tank, when he put it in there. that was not the wholesale price that he bought it for. So they're willing to take a loss on some of the speculative prices that they paid for oil and for energy to drive the alternative energy companies out of business that are not part of the whole mess. The OPEC nations do the same thing with Indonesia. Indonesia was a non-aligned country, one of the biggest oil producers in the world. They forced Indonesian oil off the market until Indonesia became an aligned country with OPEC. So these guys play vicious. They play hardball. They don't care. They'll cut your throat. And they do it. And so if you dare come, take a look at, let me make an analogy of what the automobile companies did to the Tucker automobile, or any automobile that will come on the market that challenge the big three. During all this bailout, they don't talk about the viciousness of the big three, Ford, General Motors, or Chrysler. Remember the Tucker automobile? Remember the, what was that other one that had the gold wings? The name escapes me right now. One of our listeners or one of our viewers may recall the name. But the DeLorean. Remember the DeLorean? Drove them out of business. Viciously destroyed them. Lobbied. Spent money. Couldn't put it on the market. Not energy efficient. Blah, 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 blah. These guys, although we profess to be a great country that believes in competition, these companies have put them out of business. I like somebody to ask Chrysler or ask Ford or ask General Motors, why did you force Tucker, that had a unique car, the first automobile that had the anti-lock brake system, had safety brakes, had all type of safety innovations in the car, drove them out of business. Remember the Wankel engine, what they did to that? So these guys deserve a little comeuppance on this so-called bailout, and the oil companies do the same thing. And I thank you for that information and for the questioning of what I said on Friday, Alan of Maple Shade. We go to this question from Bob from Memphis. Irv, how many of Citigroup layoffs do you think are the people almost eligible for 401k matching benefits and receive medical benefits? The problem, Bob, that I see with all of these massive layoffs is money that may be in the pool of the 401k pool and of the medical benefits that have been prepaid. And as they say, the devil is in the details. And the details of the layoff are based upon what the union agreement is with the companies, or if they're individual. When you go to work for a company, they give you an employee's handbook. And most people don't read the employee's handbook. They got a job and they're happy. Sometimes the employee's handbook looks like a telephone book. I know because I give them out sometimes to employees. And depending upon contract agreements, depending upon whether or not you're a contributing partner in a 401k with matching benefits, depending upon you buy your medical benefits from your employer or you take the medical benefit and buy it on the open market, all of these things are variables. So people who are eligible for the 401k matching benefits, it's extremely difficult. And that's one of the reasons that the whole theory of investing is rather difficult for the average person. And so you put trust in management of the company. Of course, they don't say what happens if the company fails. And what happens if they invest your money, which is your 401k, and they invest it for you, and they lose it. Are the companies held responsible for it? I don't know. It depends upon the contractual agreement that you make with your employer, whether it be through union negotiations or whether it's through private negotiations. So it's very important today, when you're dealing with money, to know how money works. And that's one of the problems. So, like I said, it depends on what agreement Citicorp had with its employees, what their 401k was, what their investment advice was, all those other things. So that takes care of Bob from Memphis. We have an open chat room here on the Irv Homer Show. Our telephone number, once again, is 215-253-8877. And it is Monday, November the 17th, 2008. And of course, Philadelphia is mourning today for the so-called football team that we used to have many, many years ago. And the funeral will be announced on the Irv Homer Show when they bury the franchise. And
Philadelphia's so bellied up?
No, not bellied up yet, but Philadelphia Eagles, I
Oh,
think.
the Eagles.
I think some. Well, we used to have a football team called the Eagles.
Well, the Philadelphia Soul won a championship.
Well, unfortunately, the Philadelphia Eagles don't have a soul because they lost it yesterday when they played the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm Irv Homer. Our chat room is available. And our telephone number, if you care to call, is 215-253-8877. And let me go into a comment that was made by the employer of a major corporation that I had breakfast with this morning, and said this in all honesty: Irv, I employ about 200 people, Americans, trying his best to not only produce his product in America, but to hire American employees. And he says, I'm not a super patriot, I'm not a conservative, I'm not a liberal. I'm concerned American, that this is my country, my company was founded here, I built it up from ground zero. And when you have 200 employees, you're a pretty good operation. And he's not complaining about the business. His business is good. It's a steady business. I won't tell you what kind of business it is, but it's something that's usually not affected by the marketplace. But he made a statement, and he said it with much caution to me. And he said, American workers are lazy. He said, American workers are lazy. And as much as he likes to hire from the American workforce, he said he's running into more and more difficulty. He had mentioned that he has a source of employees from Ireland. And he hired quite a few of them. And he said that they come to this country, they work diligently. They don't look at the time clock. They stay half an hour extra. If they're in the middle of doing something, they wait until it's finished. They're grateful for whatever benefits he provides through his work programs. And he feels that the American worker is getting lazy. Really not interested in working too hard. Interested in benefits, interested in retirement funds, interested in medical benefits. And he said that attitude in America has to change. And it's one of the reasons that American corporations are not yelling about immigration. If you noticed, President-elect Barack Obama is not talking about the immigration of 12 million people. Remember, we had all this thing about illegal immigrants coming into America. They're taking on American jobs and blah, blah, blah. Well, you would certainly think that American corporations would be super patriotic. But maybe the American corporations are suffering from the Americanization of labor. And you can't negotiate with management because the competition in the workforce is so great today. And I know from my own work experience for some 30 years of working for radio stations, I would fire them immediately, even though they were top people on the air. I mean, they only did what they were paid to do, and they wouldn't do anything else. I used to empty trash baskets. When I walked into the studio, it was filthy, and I would empty it, and the boss's secretary said, what do you do? I said, I can't stand it. It's filthy. How can anybody work in this environment? Won't tell you who preceded me in the station, but that's the way it was. So the question is, ladies and gentlemen, is the American worker lazy? And I didn't know how to answer my friend because I wasn't too familiar with the situation that he was going through. That's one of the questions posing. The other question is that the city of Philadelphia and other cities throughout the country are dismissing that they've got a problem. There's a budget shortfall. I think Philadelphia is something like $153 million that they're going to be short. But something has always bothered me. You ever notice, ladies and gentlemen, when there's a heavy snowstorm and it comes on television or radio on the news, non-essential workers do not have to report today? And that always bugged me. What is a non-essential worker? And if the worker is non-essential, why have them in the first place? Now, Philadelphia is under attack because they're going to close, I think, 11 libraries. I'm not a linguist, but if I hear one more reporter say they're going to close libraries, I think I'm going to shoot myself. Their libraries is what they're going to close. But libraries, in my opinion, are an essential part of our society. But who are these not? What is a non-essential worker that can stay home during a snowstorm or a hurricane or some type of inclement weather? And why don't they fire the non-essential workers first and then close the libraries or the recreation centers or the swimming pools and get rid of non-essential workers? I don't know what they are. And that is something that I'd like to throw out to you. Maybe somebody listening to the program or watching the program and explain to me who would have a non-essential worker work for them. I haven't got the faintest idea. To our telephone at 215-253-8877. Hello there, whoever you may be.
Well, I could tell you who a non-essential worker is.
Okay. Well,
I remember when the government ran out of money. If you recall, I don't know how many years ago that was, when the government stopped the federal government. I don't believe anybody missed them. Did you?
Yeah, that was, Howard, when they had a budget shortfall and they didn't appropriate the budget in time, so they had a big dismissal of non-essential workers. You're right, I don't remember.
Correct.
The only thing I recall, Howard, was when you needed to get a passport or something. There was a little difficulty and a delay of getting a passport.
Well, the big poke in the eye, Irv, was that after they came back to work, they paid them all the back pay that they didn't work for. I remember that as well. I got a memory like an elephant for this stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, can I move your show in a different direction?
You can. This is not a show that sets a direction. You certainly may.
Okay. I want to talk about 9/11 a little bit, and the reason I want to talk about it is I follow the Drudge Report. I watch the Drudge Report and look at the headlines that come up there, and I know he's not the most biased. He's certainly not the least biased, but I get a little smattering of what's going on in the world. And one of the things that caught my eye was, well, actually two things. One was from the CIA director, or NSA director, I can't remember which one, who says that bin Laden is cut off from his people and he is hiding out and not able to connect with his major people in order to do anything. And then the second one was that Al-Qaeda will be launching some major attack soon after Obama takes office. Let me take you back a little bit. When Bush went for the second go-around on the presidential ticket, do you recall how, I guess it was Rich that was still in charge? Do you remember when we had all the color-coded terror alerts, and we were up in the orange? We never hit the red, but we were up in the orange and the yellow, and we went up and down, up and down, up and down. You recall that?
Oh, sure. The color coding, and I still have the duct tape and the plastic in the garage.
Okay. Now, if you might also recall, I don't know if you noticed it, but right after the election was decided, all those terror alerts disappeared. They just vanished. You never heard on television anymore about the red, the yellow, whether it was green, blue, purple. They disappeared.
Well, the allegation,
Immediately.
Howard, the allegation was that we were so successful in Iraq and Afghanistan that we more or less had sublimated the Al-Qaeda and the terrorists. And that was the reason that they gave, if I recall, that the color coding of the possible danger to an attack was not disclosed on a daily basis. Now, you can take that to the bank or you can lie, or figure, which actually, in my opinion, as you do, that the color coding was false, because our intelligence in the last 8 years hasn't improved, in my opinion, maybe 10%.
Well, I don't believe that we really have intelligence. I believe that they're playing with the Americans. I think that everything is done as a scare tactic. When you get out of the country, and you got to realize something. I get my news by my choice. I don't turn on television. I have Fox News here. I get CNN. I get BBC, but I won't watch it. I certainly won't let my son watch it. And the reason that I don't watch it is because I don't want to be programmed by these people anymore. I know that they're programming everyone to think in a certain way. And the terror alerts, the blurbs that flip across the screen at the bottom of all the news media now, it's always something, Al-Qaeda this, Al-Qaeda that, and yet I think that it's all made up, and that's what brings me to 9/11. I got a couple questions. You put forth a couple of theories as to how those buildings came down, but I want to ask you a very, very simple question. Physics, anybody can answer it, you don't have to be an expert. The buildings, all three of them, fell at free fall speed through the path of most resistance. In other words, if you recall one of the I forget which tower it was, where the top portion of the tower was tilting over. Do you remember that?
That was the North Tower.
It was either World Trade Center 1 or 2. I think number 2 went first. Whatever World Trade Center 1 was that had the antenna on the top.
Right.
The top portion of the building started to tilt over towards one side, and it was listing pretty good. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't there. In other words, I can't believe, one, that building, the momentum that had begun, could have stopped. In other words, that top portion was shifting over. Now, underneath the portion of the building, in other words, just block off a third of the building at the top and watch it as it sort of tilts over. Somehow, the floors underneath that portion of the building, even though it was tipping over, meaning that it was separating from the building, somehow the floors underneath it uniformly disintegrated, which I don't hear a lot of people talk about. Some people have mentioned it, but I was watching videos of it the other day, and I'm thinking, now, exactly how did the floors that weren't touching the top of the building, because the building had actually started to tilt and separate, how did those floors uniformly disintegrate, fall through themselves, and then somewhere in the cloud of smoke that had been caused, as we're told, had been caused by the pancaking, I say that it was a controlled demolition, somehow that top portion of the building that was already tilting over didn't tilt over, didn't go anywhere, disappeared into itself. How is that possible?
Well, the explanation that they gave was that the construction of the World Trade Center had the extreme strength on the outside, or rather on the inside, but not on the outside of the building. And so when it allegedly imploded as a result of the fire that destroyed the tremendous heat from the aircraft fuel, that it destroyed the whole center structure of the building, and it collapsed from the inside because the strength of the building was on the outside. Now, these were supposed to be engineers that examined it and studied it and did the 9/11 Commission report. The thing that is more, and you know, these theories, Howard, are run all over the place. My problem with 9/11 is this, is that after every major tragedy, a commission was appointed almost immediately. The Warren Commission, the commission out in Oklahoma City. Why was it that Bush was reluctant for 2 years to impanel what was considered to be the first major attack on the United States homeland, and he was reluctant to investigate it for 2 years? What was... And
because he's guilty.
And no one...
Because he's guilty and he knows it.
No one in the press, no one who ran for political office, Kerry never mentioned it. I want to know why the president was reluctant to impanel the 9/11 Commission, and then through omissions under the guise of secrecy and intelligence, which they didn't have in the first place, because if they had intelligence, they would have known what was going to happen, and so they could have prevented it.
Let me answer the one question that you asked. In fact, somebody just saw in the chat room asked another question. I think they said, who was it that was behind it? I'll certainly say that who I think is behind it, because I don't believe that anybody else could have done it other than people within our government. But let me answer the question about the heat.
That's the one thing.
Let me answer.
Well, let me say that's
Go ahead.
That's the one thing I reject. My theory is that I'm with a law firm here in Philadelphia who is bringing suit against the government of Saudi Arabia. And that lawsuit is predicated on how I feel that this was a state-sponsored terrorist attack by Saudi Arabia. It had nothing to do, or it may have been with the compliance of bin Laden, but nobody's going to convince me that A, Saudi Arabia is our friend, and B, that Saudi Arabia is not under attack by its own Wahhabi fundamentalist terrorists, Muslims, in Saudi Arabia. And this was a state-sponsored terror attack to placate and to protect the powerful mullahs and all these other fancy dictators in Saudi Arabia.
Let me answer what you just said, because maybe I can convince you otherwise. And here's my best shot at it. The 3 buildings fell to the ground, which all 3 of them look like a controlled demolition. Now, Building 7 was a spook house. Building 7 housed the CIA, the NSA, New York's Emergency Management Building. In other words, it was the second largest building full of U.S. spies and operatives outside of Quantico, Virginia.
Right.
Now, you tell me, if we agree, and you have to when you look at the evidence, but if we agree that those buildings came down because of a controlled demolition, then the next question is, who would have access to that building? Because the Port Authority had security responsibilities for the World Trade Centers 1 and 2, but the U.S. government had the security responsibility for Building 7. Who got in and wired Building 7? I'll tell you, it wasn't the Arabs. Because nobody got in and out of Building 7 who didn't belong in there.
Look, I recall the time that the late President Ronald Reagan was shot, and they talked about, security, and the theory was then, and I agree with this theory, and it wasn't only from American people, but I agree that anybody, anywhere in the world can be killed. I don't care if you're a dictator, a president, or anything else. And I still maintain, Howard, that with enough money that Saudi Arabia could pour into this country to cause that demolition of Building 7, you could buy just about anybody in the sun, including CIA agents.
Okay, but you would have to buy them for quite a long time, Irv, because
it wouldn't take
in
long
order for them to wire that building, hold on a second, in order for them to wire that building, they had to have weeks, if not months, of access to it.
Well,
that was not done.
No, I don't think the form of wiring a building is as prevalent as this today. It can be individual explosive located that can be detonated with a cell phone. You know that, Howard. So it wouldn't take much.
Well,
it wouldn't take much.
I believe that they were. I believe, Irv, that they were detonated from one of those aircraft that we use for continuity of government. The ones that fly over with all the electronics and everything like that.
Oh, sure.
Because one of those aircraft was seen flying behind the buildings right before they fell to the ground. Well, and also at the same time that Building 7 came down.
Well,
I believe it was remote controlled.
In conclusion,
and it certainly can be done.
The fact is,
let me throw another question to you. Let me throw another thing to you. That's something you said when you talked about the high heat in the building.
Yeah.
Okay. If you recall, both buildings fell within about 45 minutes of being hit. Number one, it wasn't enough time for them to get hot enough. But if the buildings were so hot, can you explain, or anybody else explain to me, how people were seen standing in the holes that the aircraft had made? If the buildings were so hot that it melted steel, how did those people stand there holding on to the edge of the building, waving for help?
The heat that was generated by the aircraft fuel, Howard, took time to heat that metal, and at that point, I don't know what the metal was rather well manufactured, but it took a tremendous amount of time for that heat to generate to destroy that metal of the buildings that were the support beams. So there could have been time to stand there while you were getting.
No, there was. Within 10 or 15 minutes. Within 10 or 15 minutes of the planes hitting the building, there are people standing in the holes on the floors where the aircraft did damage. The people that had filtered into the area that couldn't go down and couldn't exit the building because all the stairwells were blocked, they were standing where we are being told the high heat and everything else has melted the steel.
But the initial fire takes time to generate heat. That was the wiggle time that those people had, in my opinion, to stand, because don't forget, they were high up in the air. There was a lot of wind blowing up there. There was a lot of cool air blowing. So it was a possibility that the wind was deterring the flames and the heat from affecting them while they were standing there. Howard, it's always a pleasure, but I do have to move on. Thank you so much. That was Howard from Thailand, ladies and gentlemen. Our chat room is available. Once again, our telephone is available to you at 215-253-8877. My name is Irv Homer, and we introduce things on this program and question things, looking for the truth. Let's go to our next chat room question. It says, Irv, what purpose or goal did the Saudis have to inflict such devastation and risk a backlash? Well, I had mentioned to Howard, and I mentioned over and over again, you must remember, in my opinion, and this is proven by fact, that Saudi Arabia is under attack from its own Wahhabi, militant, Muslim, Islamic fundamentalists. It is not a democracy. Saudi Arabia is a country that was stolen and renamed from the House of Saud. It would be the same as if we named our country Washington America or General Grant America. The Saudis stole the country and built a monarchy there. This is not a democratic government there. And they are supported by the fundamentalist Islamic terrorists. And it is the Wahhabi. Look it up. Look it up on your computer. Look it up in the dictionary what Wahhabism is. They will kill and destroy the government of Saudi Arabia if they don't adhere to fundamentalist Muslim terroristic tactics. And so the Saudi government, in compliance to protect their own Arab behinds, through the help of the Wahhabis who wanted the Americans out of Saudi Arabia. Don't forget, we had 2 airfields in Saudi Arabia that were removed by the Saudi government. One moved to the United Arab Emirates and one moved to Qatar. Now, if the Saudi Arabians are our allies, why would they force us to move when Saddam Hussein allegedly was attacking the individual nations of the Middle East after they went into Kuwait? And as far as the backlash is concerned, they don't care about a backlash. They've got the oil that we need. So we would make a deal with the devil. And why was it that they flew the Saudi Arabian nationals when all air travel was grounded in America? 2 747s loaded with Saudi Arabians from New York took off and flew back to Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis don't care about a backlash. We buy oil from them and we need oil. They drove our Air Force out of Saudi Arabia to comply with the Wahhabis. And when we were in Saudi Arabia protecting their Arab behinds, Christians and Jewish servicemen, United States servicemen, and female officers are not permitted to display any religious icons whatsoever. An American serviceman who may be a Christian cannot show his cross. A Jew cannot show the Star of David. If you marry out of the religion in Saudi Arabia, you will be killed. That's today when they're our allies. They're our friends, as you see President Bush walking down shaking hands with Prince Saud. So study what this country of Saudi Arabia is. I read last week an article here from the Inquirer. Pope calls for tolerance in meeting with Muslims. And I will quote directly from the paper here. And this was last week. In Saudi Arabia, non-Muslims cannot worship in public, and Muslims who convert face death. This is our ally. This is the country, ladies and gentlemen, that we kiss their behind because they've got oil. We welcome them to the White House. We break bread with them. I don't, but our president does. But if they convert to Christianity or Judaism, they'll kill you. That's a criminal offense in Saudi Arabia. And that's what the Pope had this meeting with the Muslims about last week. Hard to believe, but it happens to be the truth. Oil and money dictates everything. I'll send you a copy of this article. Send me a self-addressed stamped envelope. We'll put this on the website. You can read it for yourself. I'll read it again just so it sinks in. In Saudi Arabia, non-Muslims cannot worship in public. If you're a Christian or a Jew, you can't worship in public. You don't have a church or a synagogue to worship in. And Muslims who convert to Christianity face death, or if they marry out of the faith. They're our allies. But the average American don't give a hoot in hell as long as we can get gasoline in our cars. People don't care that Luke Oil is owned by Russia. You buy Luke Oil and gasoline. Citgo is owned by Chavez in Venezuela, who is an archenemy, allegedly, of the United States. But I guarantee you there are folks listening or watching or knowing people, they'll get Luke Oil, the Russians, Russia, Citgo, Chavez shoots his mouth off, America's out of deadly evil, put Venezuela gas in our car. And of course we'll make the Saudis richer and richer. What is it, $79 billion a year we buy in oil from those people? And you must remember, I think it was Khrushchev who banged on the board. Remember, he banged on the rostrum at the United Nations many years ago. He says, the American people will have enough rope to hang themselves. And he was right. That we gave the American people enough rope and we're hanging ourselves. I took him serious. I knew what the man was talking about. I warned my listeners about it. When your enemy makes a threat, you better take it serious. And Khrushchev made a threat during the Kennedy administration that the world will give you enough rope for you to hang yourself. And are we not hanging ourselves? It doesn't take too much to be a prophet, Prophet, because the mistakes you make today, you're going to pay for somewhere down the line. And we started making mistakes then. Jimmy Carter may have been a crazy nut and a screwball, and he may be a nutcase then, and maybe anti-Israel and everything else. But Carter developed an energy department, if you recall. And during the Carter administration, he was destroyed. Inflation went crazy. If you remember, the interest rates were double digit. They destroyed Jimmy Carter for a reason. He was a threat to the oil-producing nations. He recognized the fact that as a nuclear, don't forget, Jimmy Carter was a nuclear commander of a nuclear submarine. He was no dummy. His politics left a lot to be desired. But in my opinion, it was a conspiracy to destroy the Carter administration because he recognized eventually that America must be energy independent. And the power boys, who didn't care if they were doing business with a terrorist country like Saudi Arabia or some of the other Arab countries that are fundamentalist Muslims, he had to be destroyed. And they did a pretty good job on Carter in destroying him. As I said, I don't particularly care much for his social rhetoric, and I don't care too much about his political rhetoric, but the man was right, and and Reagan made a big joke. He's crazy. Well, don't worry about that. So sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you have to listen to the message and ignore the messenger. The message is probably right. The messenger you may not agree with. Our next question from the chat room is, Irv, if this is true about the Saudis and our government knows this, why are the Bushes still friends with the Saudis? Well, because the Bush is the government. The Bushes, my dear friend, is the government. Don't forget, Prescott Bush, President Bush's great-grandfather, was a Nazi sympathizer. And most of the Arab nations and the Grand Mullahs supported the Nazi government of Germany during World War II. Their history of alliance with the Saudis and the Saud family goes back many, many years. It just isn't a local phenomenon. These are old Nazi supporters from way back, the Bush family. And of course, you can't say, well, you can't hold, the son responsible for the father's crimes and blah, 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 and 7 generations must expire. That's nonsense. When you've got an allegiance and alliance, because oil has no nationality, oil has no honor, oil and money has absolutely no, well, what word am I looking for? No allegiance. And Bush's family and the big boys like Cheney and so forth, they have no allegiance to the United States. They have an allegiance to the power and the money that they have on the world market. We're little peons. You live in Feasterville or Bucks County or Montgomery County, you have local connections. And then, well, maybe you move into the state connections. And maybe these guys are international. These guys play for billions and billions of dollars and control the fate of millions and millions of people. The average person, including myself, who over the years have educated myself at this point, have no idea or conceiving what it is like to deal with the rest of the world. There's 100 and some different nations in the United Nations. Every one of them has an individual culture, individual religions, individual odysseys to them. So these people are internationalists. They're not local. And I repeat once again, did you ever hear the Rockefellers or any of the DuPonts or did you ever hear any of them complain about communism? Did you ever hear one multi-international millionaire ever complain about communism or Nazism? I dare you to go through your computer files, go through research. Show me one Rockefeller that ever said that communism was evil or that socialism was evil. No, you know who does it? The blowheads on television, on radio. They'll scare communism away. I never heard a rich multinational operator ever say, did you ever hear the president of General Motors say how evil China's cheap labor is? Slave labor? You never heard that. Clothes made in Bangladesh by people for 50 cents an hour? Maybe 50 cents a day? Multinational people think different than we think. They have no allegiance to the American dollar, no allegiance to the United States, and you people, let me include myself, we buy because it's cheap. You don't care if the sweater comes from China where the guy works 15 hours a day for $2 a day. What the hell do you care? What do we care? It's cheap. And that's why we drive foreign automobiles. Imagine them automobile workers in Detroit for General Motors and Ford and Chrysler. They make $30 an hour. Of course, they pay half of that to the government in taxes. So we'd rather buy an automobile made with slave labor in Korea or buy automobiles that are made in Japan where there's no benefits to the workers. So don't tell me about how concerned you are about the workforce. We'd like the American worker that makes American automobiles to work for about $15 a day. Then we could buy automobiles for less than $35,000, $40,000. You have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that American capitalism operates on slave labor. America was developed with slave labor. And the history of American capitalism, and I'm not anti-American, I'm merely pointing out facts, and if you want to dispute them, fine, dispute them. We needed slavery to get America off ground zero in the textile industry. But did you ever wonder why we couldn't put the Indians in slavery? Why was it necessary to go to Africa and bring black Africans over to America with slave trade when we had all these Indians here we could have captured and made them slaves to do the work? You ever think about that? We were killing Indians that we could have made slaves, but we're bringing Africans in by boat. Don't make sense. You got a labor force here.
Yeah.
Why didn't we make the Indians slaves? So then to build our railroads, we imported the Chinese slave labor here to America. Then when we needed the coal mines developed, we brought the Europeans, the Austrians, the Hungarians that worked our coal mines until John L. Lewis organized the coal miners. They were dying of black lung. Thousands of them were being killed in the mud. We need slave labor in a capitalist society to make capitalism work. If capitalism was so great, you wouldn't have to have minimum wage laws. If our form of capitalism was so wonderful, why do we need a minimum wage law where the government says you have to pay somebody so many dollars an hour because they can't make it otherwise? And we have things called the working poor. Well, if you're working, why would you be poor? If you're working 2 jobs, why would you be poor? There's something wrong with an economic and a financial system that when you work 2, 3 jobs, you still can't live a halfway decent life if you're making minimum wage proclaimed by the government. So then as we had the Freedom Act, 1985, which was a Civil Rights Act, we couldn't keep blacks in slavery anymore, and I mean economic slavery, because if you're not making a living, it doesn't make any difference whether your body's in slavery or your mind is in slavery, or if your means of labor is in slavery. We decided to open up the floodgates and bring the Central and South Americans in. So now we got 11 million more slaves that are cutting our grass, doing our building. I had 12 guys put a roof on my American contractor, put a roof on my house, tore the old one off and put a new one on. They must have had 14, 15 guys here. Not one of them spoke English. So America needs, our form of capital needs slave labor to operate efficiently. While we're screaming about the cheap products of China, how great it is, and of Korea, and of Taiwan, and Bangladesh, and Indonesia, and all the other stuff we buy, we don't care about them. They're slaves. The hell with them. We're buying their goods. But American automobile worker who works, he's making too damn much money. So think about it. I'm Irv Homer, and we're broadcasting from irvhomer.com. This program is brought to you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can go to our archive on the website, www.irvhomer.com. My email address is evilirv@irvhomer.com if you care to send me an email that you can't get through on our chat room or our telephone number. And you can call us at 21. We went to the trouble of putting this phone number in, and thank goodness that Howard seems to be the only one that uses it. 215-253-8877, 215-233, or 253 rather, 8877, 215-253-8877. That line is available. And this service is brought to you by RGH Computer Services. If you have any computer problems at all, and you're frustrated and you can't get service almost immediately, you call RGH Computer Services. Sometimes, and I give them the devil, they'll answer your problem right over a telephone and say, look, there's no sense in paying for a service call because this can be resolved over the phone, and they do it. And I say, look, why don't you look, if it can be done over the telephone, we'll do it over the telephone. But if you, especially if you have a security problem, give them a call at 215-322-8685, 215-322-8685. I'm Irv Homer. Let's go to our chat room. Wasn't George Herbert Walker Bush a war hero? And would that make them traitors if they are linked with the Saudis who are guilty of the 9/11 atrocity? Well, George H.W. Bush, the president's father, I believe, was shot down by the Japanese, not by the Europeans. And so the Bush family, had President Bush been, former President Bush, 41, would have been the president, shot down by the Germans, I think it would have been a different story. And then you could say, well, you know, the great thing about some religions is the act of forgiveness. And so we forgive our enemies. But President Bush's dad. And why is this when you're shot down, you're a war hero? I was shot down. I'm not a hero. I was damn lucky I escaped. What is this crap that if you get shot down, you're a hero? You know who's the hero? The guy that shot you down. I'd like to find the German son of a bitch that shot my plane down. That's the guy I'd like to find. And as George Patton said, I'll give you a damn medal. Because you deserve a medal. That Nazi bastard's running around someplace right now in Germany. Maybe he's dead. But that's the guy that was the hero. Everybody's a hero today. No, people who get shot down, in my opinion, are not heroes. They're either lousy pilots, but the guy that shot him down was a better pilot than he was, and that's why he shot you down. So that's the answer to that question. Our chat room is available. Our telephone number, once again, 215-253-8877. The big problem is, ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is something local. This is something local. I don't know how many of you remember a reporter, a columnist, and wasn't a reporter as much as a columnist, but also a fellow broadcaster of Inside Story, and that was the general name of Chuck Stone. Chuck Stone's claim to fame was, number one, he's brilliant, African American, and second of all, he was a sincere, dear friend of mine, who now teaches, or has a chair, whatever that means. I'm not college educated, so he has a chair at North Carolina University, and has become an ordained minister. He doesn't practice and he doesn't preach, but he always had a fascination with religion, and he wanted to be, so he, at his late age, I think about 10 years ago, he was ordained and graduated top of his class. But Chuck had a unique thing in Philadelphia. And every criminal who was afraid of police brutality or afraid of getting beat up used to turn themselves into Chuck when he wrote for the Philadelphia Daily News. And he would meet with them with their attorney, and he would escort them to the police station, and they would turn themselves in, and Chuck used to watch to make sure that there was no police brutality involved. You must remember the Philadelphia Police Department had a bad reputation of police brutality. Individual police officers, of course I know, 6,000 policemen are going to find some bad apples, I know that, all that crap. There were some bad cops in Philadelphia years ago. And so I don't know how many they turned, something like 80 criminals over the period of time in Philadelphia turned themselves into Chuck. And they were tried and punished. Or if they were innocent, they were found innocent. But Chuck watched very carefully the procedure from the time of the arrest until the time of the adjudication of these criminals. There is no such people today in the broadcast media. And when Chuck left Philadelphia, I suggested on our radio station that the biggest percentage of them, unfortunately, were African Americans that turned themselves into Chuck, who was African American. I suggested that all white criminals that wanted to turn themselves in, that were tired of hiding and tired of eluding the police, could turn themselves in to me at the radio station, and I would guarantee their safety and security as they went through the process of being tried. And an African American that I was working with could turn themselves into that individual. I won't tell you whether male or female. Well, that person, I don't want to deal with them. Well, wait a minute. What better way to get a guy or a gal who is a criminal who wants to turn themselves in, but they're afraid to turn themselves in? I'm sure there may be some people watching this program that has a son, a kid, a daughter, maybe you yourself, but want to turn yourself into the IRS, want to turn yourself into the police, want to turn yourself into the CIA. I don't know. So I'm suggesting that there be some brave broadcaster on commercial radio in the Philadelphia market or New York market or wherever you're listening to this program from to volunteer to the law enforcement of your community that you will meet with any criminal and their attorney and be the negotiator to turn themselves in. We've got to get habitual criminals off the street. And a lot of guys and gals will continue to commit crime, but inside they want to turn themselves in, but they're afraid. The same as if you're in back taxes. If you're afraid of the IRS, so you continue to hide and run and change your name and use identity theft and all those other things. This is a plea for somebody brave in the broadcast media, radio or television, to volunteer to have these criminals turn themselves in. And they will act as a negotiator. Don't turn yourself in to me. I'm too old to deal with that. I've done it in my lifetime. I'm Irv Homer. Don't forget, on Wednesday, John DePremio from Citizens for Common Sense will be our guest on Wednesday. We have some time to take your telephone calls at 215-253-8877, 215-253-8877. Another suggestion that's come up, and this is amazing to me, why we are ignoring the problem of immigration. I suppose that the big fear is whether or not this recession, depression, possible, could be, maybe we won't, maybe we will have it, maybe we won't, is going to affect you personally. Well, the predictions that I'm watching from the Money Channel and the information of people that I speak to and the banking industry that I speak with are predicting that the year 2009 is going to be worse than this year, that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and that there will be dramatic changes made after January the 20th, when President-elect Barack Obama becomes the president. Now, I made a prediction when the market went to 8,500. And at that time, it was at 14,000. Oh, wherever you're crazy, blah, blah, blah. I said, it's going to go to 8,500. It's now at about 84. I predict that after the election, with the bailouts, with all the nonsense, the market will go to about 6,500. Now, I'm not a financial wizard, and I don't want to hear from your stories about what to do with your money. I have requests here for me to contact people. What should they do with their investments? Should they bail out now? Shouldn't they bail out now? I am not licensed to give financial advice, and I wouldn't do it. I'm merely saying that I predict the market will go to about 6,500 after the inauguration, January the 20th. Because if you take a look at the solid assets without the balloon, and the balloon is anticipated revenue, the stock that is going to be left in the market is going to be worth about 6,500, about 6,500. And looking at the rest of the world's markets, our market is way overpriced even today. And we've taken a hit from 14,000 down to 8,400. Now, you talk to your investment people, excuse me, and you deal with that. But since people have sent me email and asking me, those are one of the things that I suggest. Another thing to take into consideration is suggestions that are being made now to something that is good and it's bad. And that is that these are proposals in the proposal of the Barack administration as to whether or not the Barack Obama administration, whether or not national identification cards should become a reality. As I said, the devil is usually in the details. How do you identify? If you were stopped on the street today, ladies and gentlemen, and a police officer says, prove you're an American citizen, how do you do it? How do you do it? Show me your driver's license? Show me your social security card, which can be for. How do you prove that you're an American citizen? Now, unreported is the massive voter fraud, not through Acorn, but voter fraud of identity theft of voting. One of the proposals under the Barack Obama administration is going to be, how do you issue national identity cards without scaring the bejabbers out of people who remember Nazi Germany, where everyone had a national identity card? And how do you prove you're a citizen if you get arrested or stopped for a motor vehicle or a DUI? How do you do it? I couldn't prove it. I have to give them my birth certificate, but my birth certificate is in a safe deposit box. So while we're lamenting the defeat of the Eagles, and while we're still partying and having a good time at the casinos, there's some serious issues coming up. And in this transition period, where these guys haven't got the faintest idea of what the hell they're doing when it comes to the $700 billion and the $250 billion. Take my word for it, ladies and gentlemen, they don't know what the hell is going on or what the future is going to be. And I listen carefully to these financial advisors. I watch television very carefully. And as a result, I've been approached to do something that I'm very reluctant to do. May tell you about it on Wednesday night. I'm Irv Homer. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for viewing. Thanks so much for calling. Till the next time.